Sponsor NordLayer is a network security platform built for modern business, combining VPN, access control, and threat protection in one platform. No hardware, no complex setup.
Just secure connection and full control in less than 10 minutes. Find out more at nordlayer.com and use coupon code NNetworking-10 for up to 22% off yearly plans plus 10% on top. Welcome to N is for Networking, the show where we deconstruct the jargon of the networking industry. Take these terms that don't mean anything to you and make them mean something. I'm Ethan Banks, and with me is Holly Metlitsky. And the format here is I'm the guy that's been around for a while, and Holly's newer to this, and so we talk about this stuff together. Supposedly, I have some answers, or I've seen some things that maybe Holly hasn't, and so we discuss. Today's topic, DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, and Holly, as you and I were talking before the podcast, you already know everything about DHCP, is that right?
Oh, no. I'm going to go with the no. I'd like to think I do, but it's very unlikely.
Well, all right, then you are at least familiar with DHCP, so why don't you lead us off with in general, what is it? What's DHCP?
Sure. So DHCP is a protocol, a dynamic host configuration protocol. And the manner in which I've dealt with it is it's a protocol that helps to assign IP addresses and maybe other things surrounding IP addresses to devices when they connect to the server, let's say. We'll get to it.
Yeah, exactly. If you were sitting around at your Windows desktop and manually configuring an IP address, DHCP would take the place of that manual configuration. It's going to dynamically assign an IP address, and as you said, other important things that the host might need to know to effectively communicate on the network. And there's more stuff too. We'll get to that. Historically, DHCP was defined in RFC 2131. So we talk on this show about documentation that the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, has created. And RFC 2131 it's an oldie. It's been around a long time. Goes back to March 1997. Defines the framework for DHCP. A lot of other RFCs, too, that we could talk about that are additional things that enhance DHCP functionality. We're not going to get into that today, but RFC 2131, if you want to go read the guts of how DHCP as a protocol works from a standards perspective. Now, there's another historical footnote here, Holly, which is boot P. Have you heard of that one?
Definitely, I saw that in the notes and it like rang a bell in my head. And I think it was one of those things like, yeah, this existed and we don't discuss it. So.
And that's what we're going to say here too. It existed, and we don't need to discuss it really. BootP is a historical artifact. Before DHCP was the way we assign IP addresses to hosts, BootP would have been the mechanism that was used. And I'm just old enough to have remembered working on a BootP server way back in the day. This would have been like the mid to late 90s before DHCP again had taken over everywhere. So if you see BootP, RFC 951, if you're curious, that would be the predecessor to DHCP. And in fact, there's some documents that are out there that exist for the coexistence of DHCP and BootP servers, but you're never going to run into that in the modern world, probably. I mean, if you find a BootP server running in production somewhere, I want to hear that story. I want to know why that's still a thing and what the use case is for BootP here in 2025.
I've got a bit of a side note that's got nothing to do with DHCP, but it's got to do with RFCs. And I just wanted to bring it up real quick because I think it's important. And I know we're a little bit far into NS for networking for me to bring this up, but I realized the other day I was chatting to a work colleague who's also new in networking. And I mentioned, I can't remember what we were discussing, but I mentioned something about an RFC, and their response was, "What's that?" And I think people who are newer to networking don't get introduced to RFCs. So just wanted to make a point that they exist, and you can find them, I think, on the IETF's website. Just search for the specific RFC, and you can do a lot of reading there. But just wanted to make a note of that because I realized that the reason why I know about RFCs is because of you in this podcast. So.
Yeah, and it's funny, and you should run into them in your certification studies too. They should get referred to. They're referred to in networking textbooks. I mean, they should come up or be referred to from time to time. Is that not the case?
I don't know. It might be one of those things that was maybe mentioned, and I was like, RFC 2131. Okay, whatever. Moving on. It's some footnote number.
Yeah.
But it was never really discussed as to what they really are. So,
Yeah, I mean, I bring them up all the time because early in my networking career, they seem like these intimidating standards documents. I mean, and they are standards documents, right? But just the intimidation factor was these are written by these, top grade network engineers who know this stuff so deeply, and a lot of the terminology in there felt hard to get my head around,
yeah.
and so on. But they'd at least be referred to. It's like I want to know where OSPF comes from a networking perspective. There are RFC request for comments documents that itemize how OSPF works and DHCP and lots and lots and lots of other protocols. And the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, they meet 3 times a year to work on progressing these standards to finally become RFCs, many of which, not every RFC is a quote unquote standard. Sometimes they're just
Mm,
informational, or they're just interesting. And you can tell in the header of each RFC whether this is a standard or just an informational document or whatever its status might be. Um, the IETF is a really interesting organization. They have working groups that cover all kinds of different areas and disciplines. So any little corner of networking that you find interesting, the IETF is probably doing some important work there to create new standards that help define what's next. You'll also find, as you look at the release notes for network operating systems, like Junos in your
mm.
world at Juniper there, that the update may encompass some new standard that's been ratified by the IETF, and yep, now we are compliant with that standard, or we offer the feature that was codified in that standard. So that's something you can keep your eye out for in release notes, especially if you have a very particular use case and you've been waiting for this RFC to be standardized and then your vendor to implement it. That's a thing you can look for in release notes. So yeah, you don't think of them every day because who reads RFCs every day? But they're actually a big part of the networking ecosystem, what's going on in the IETF and
Yeah.
the RFC documents. So, as you say, good commercial break. Now let's
Back to
continue
the
on with
topic at hand.
DHCP. All right, so what do we use DHCP for? The big thing is to assign an IP address to a network client. A client comes on the wire. If you haven't manually assigned one, it needs one. And so we can use the DHCP process to give it an IP address. Holly, way back in the default gateway episode, whatever episode number that was, we talked about
Yeah.
uh, subnet mask and the default gateway and some other things. So can you remind us what if you were sitting in front of a Windows client or a Mac or something and you had to manually assign the IP address? What are the other things that you would add to that list? I mean, I just said some of them, I know, but
Yeah. So you'd have the IP address, you'd have the subnet mask, the
yep,
default gateway,
right.
and there's something else. Um,
It was in the last
yeah,
episodes we recorded.
the DNS servers. There we
Yes,
go.
she got there. Yeah,
I was like,
exactly.
I'm like looking at the list in my head. I can see like I can see my CLI. I'm like, it's over there. It's at the bottom. What is it?
Yeah, yeah. The other big thing that you tend to assign
Yes.
manually would be DNS, and that at the core of DHCP would be the functionality that you're getting there. That IP address. The host is also going to need to know who's local to it and what traffic it needs to send to the default gateway. So it needs to know the subnet mask. It needs to know what its default gateway is in DHCP terminology. That would be the router that it's going to go to. So for any communications that are outside of its local LAN, local area network. Uh, and we need to know some domain name servers so that when we punch
Yep.
into our browser hostname.com, it knows how to resolve hostname.com into an IP address. And that gives you your basic TCP IP communication stack functionality that we need. And DHCP will do all of that. Uh,
And this is one of those things where you're like, oh, you know everything about DHCP. Well, yes and no. The no comes in. I didn't really think about it beyond, oh, you get an IP address.
mhm.
And you forget that just getting an IP address has all of those other things connected to it, like the subnet mask, the the default gateway, etc. I was like, oh, it gets an IP. I didn't really think about it more than that. And
Hmm.
now discussing it, I'm like, well, yes, it gets an IP, but it also gets all of these other things. So it's not just as basic as it just gets the IP address. So it was an
And
interesting
there's so
thought.
much more that
Yeah.
DHCP can share with a client as information. We're going to get into that in a minute, but let's talk about the structure of this, kind of how it
Hmm.
works first of all. So if I'm a DHCP client, what am I communicating with for that DHCP communication to happen? I'm communicating with some kind of a server, right? There's got to be,
Yeah.
in other words, there's got to be something listening out there. If I'm a client that pops up on the wire and says, "Hey, I need an IP address," there's got to be some service that's listening to go, "Oh, you need an IP? I can help you with that." And that's a DHCP server. So next question then is, has Holly ever run a DHCP server?
Kind of.
Kind of. Well,
Um,
that's a
I,
yes or no question. How is it kind of?
I mean, I have configured a device to act as a DHCP server, I guess. So I've
Oh, okay.
defined,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
So
like a
like,
Junos box or a
yes,
Linux
yeah,
server or something like that?
yeah.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
I think our firewalls can be DHCP servers. So then in that you
Very probably, yeah.
define what is required by the server to then lease those IP addresses.
So yes, you have. You have done
Yeah.
DHCP server. But maybe you didn't. There are many implementations
Yeah.
out there of DHCP servers that you might have worked with. Junos has got one. Cisco's got one for sure if you're in the networking world. Like you can configure a Cisco router running Cisco iOS to be a DHCP server.
Hmm.
It's not the most powerful DHCP or easy to configure DHCP server in the world. Definitely works. You can totally do it. Lots of labs online that will explain to you how to do that configuration, how it works, how to check the lease status, and so on. We haven't even talked about leases yet, but we should mention leases, I guess, since it comes up. When a DHCP client comes up on the wire and asks for that IP address, it's going to be given an IP address by the server, and part of that arrangement is a lease time. That is, you can't have the IP address forever. You can only have it for a certain amount of time. That's the lease period. And when the lease period comes up, if the client still needs the address, it can renew the lease. And typical leases are for a few hours to a day, maybe, and then the server tracks that. And if the lease is not renewed, the IP address that was issued to the client goes back into the pool so that someone else can use it. That way, you don't just give out your IP addresses, and when your pool is empty, like I'm out, I have no more. The lease is the function that allows addresses to be returned to the pool so that they can be used by another client that might need it later.
So on that, I'm a client, or I have a client. I'm not a client. It's connected to the network, and it's just gotten its IP address from the DHCP server. Its lease expires when it gets. I guess if it's still connected to the network, it's then going to request a new one, saying, "Hey, my IP address expired. Can you give me a new address?" Will that, because it's still connected to the network and hasn't disconnected, will it be assigned the same IP address from that pool, assuming that another client hasn't somehow gotten it in between?
Yeah, no, right. Effectively, it's going to do a renewal.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're asking technical details. I didn't actually review the lease expiration process, what happens, but basically the lease itself is renewed. It's going to keep that
Yes.
same IP address forever as long as it requests,
Okay.
that the lease renews. Basically, I still need this address. I'm renewing the lease, and the server says, "Okay, your lease has been renewed."
Hmm.
So it's not gonna negotiate for a new address and hope it gets the same one. You're gonna that lease is gonna be renewed. I don't actually remember the packet sequence between client and server on that detail, but yeah, you'll have the same address forever as long as you're on the wire requesting that your lease be renewed. Yeah. Okay. So you're
Yeah.
not. It's not gonna like, oh, your lease expired. You get a new IP address. It's not
But I
like
don't
that.
want that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're going to get the same one.
Yeah.
And I guess there's even a bigger question that's worth bringing this up now. You can do something on your DHCP server called a DHCP reservation, where
Hmm.
you want a host on your network that is configured to use DHCP, be a DHCP client, to get the same IP address, even if it disappears off the wire for a while and then it comes back 3 days later. and pops back up, it'll get
Hmm.
that same IP address if you've configured the DHCP server with a DHCP reservation.
Okay.
You do the reservation via MAC address. So this gets into our layer
Yeah.
2, layer 3 stuff. So the Ethernet MAC address, you would configure the lease reservation on the DHCP server and say, hey, if this MAC address comes up, this is the IP address you're going to give that MAC address every time. And that can be super useful. I've used that many times. Servers or different things like I don't know, maybe an IP camera or something that I actually care that the IP address is the same all the time for whatever my reasons are. I will use a DHCP reservation on the server to make sure that that device gets the
Yeah.
same IP address every time. So that's yet another way you can be confident that if you care that a server, or I'm sorry, that a host on your network gets the same IP address every time, and you don't want to manually configure it, you can do a DHCP reservation. That's another option for you. So we mentioned DHCP servers. Let's go back to that topic for a minute. So a DHCP server,
Yeah.
it's software that runs on a server somewhere of a variety of different form factors. So for example, we were mentioning a Cisco IOS router, a Junos box. They can be DHCP servers, but then Microsoft Windows servers got a DHCP server functionality. There's a whole bunch of products in the networking landscape that fall under a particular heading of, here's a new acronym for you, Holly,
Hmm.
DDI. Have you run into DDI before as a product category?
No, I haven't. I don't think.
It stands for DHCP, DNS, and IPAM.
Okay.
So
No, definitely
three
not. Yeah.
acronyms that make up another acronym, but DDI, DHCP, DNS, and IPAM, and there are vendors that make these are all kind of closely related products. DNS servers, DHCP servers, and IPAM, which is IP address management. They're all kind of closely related, and so there's a number of vendors that will make products. Or make services that all work together very tightly under their product umbrella. So Blue Cat is a company in this space. Efficient IP is another one. Infoblox is really big in this space. Manage Engine's another one. There's probably more, probably many more that I'm forgetting actually. But yeah, it's pretty common to buy a third-party suite of services that handle DHCP, DNS, and IPAM, IP address management, all under one software suite.
Now, how do you connect this DHCP server? Um, I guess so. For example, a lot of modern day like deployments require zero touch provisioning where you plug in a
Mhm.
device and it's got to connect to DHCP. But so
Yep.
you've got that DHCP server sitting there waiting. How is that
Mhm.
connected to like your ISP, or does it even need to be? Like, how does that process work?
So zero touch provisioning can happen in a few different ways.
Yep.
On a local network, it would be a broadcast that goes out, DHCP server. It's going to do a broadcast for DHCP server service, get an IP address, and maybe get some other information.
Yep.
So we haven't talked about DHCP options yet. We'll get there. But backing up there, the DHCP server communications between the DHCP client and the DHCP server are done as a broadcast to your local network. So let's
Hmm.
talk. Let's walk through this. Let's forget about zero touch provisioning and that
Yeah.
context right now. That's a very common use case where DHCP is part of the ZTP kickoff process, so that box can get provisioned. But in a normal way that this would, or the simplest way, not normal, but in the simplest possible configuration, your host puts a broadcast on the wire, uh, and a DHCP server that can see that broadcast is going to go, oh, the client needs an IP address. They requested it via this broadcast. I'm a DHCP server. I will respond to that broadcast request and say to the DHCP client, here's an IP address, and the two of them will unicast to each other, no longer broadcast, but unicast to each other back and forth until the DHCP offer and is accepted, and so on. So that's in the simplest
Yeah.
configuration. They're on the same network segment. They're in the same VLAN. The DHCP
Hmm.
client and the DHCP server see each other, discovered via that broadcast packet that the client sends out. and then the unicast conversation progresses from there. So the more interesting question then, because so let's take a step back. Imagine you're a network engineer responsible for DHCP infrastructure, and knowing the default way that DHCP works is just what we described. It's a broadcast. There's a fundamental issue here. Broadcasts don't go past your router, past your layer 3 gateway. They're
Yeah.
contained within a VLAN. So that kind of means you'd have to have a DHCP server on every VLAN, which, how would that work?
Or you have a dedicated DHCP VLAN that every other device has.
Couldn't do that because you would.
Well, everything would then be trunked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you exactly. That wouldn't go. That wouldn't go.
Mm.
Couldn't go if you wanted. There is a very easy way that this is solved, and it sounds like maybe you haven't run into this one before.
I don't think so. Maybe?
Okay, because you can, and you typically will have a single DHCP server that can service a whole bunch of VLANs within an organization, even though that DHCP server is not connected to every individual VLAN directly.
Oh,
The
I
answer
do
to the
know where we're
question
going with
is,
this.
okay, where are we going with this?
DHCP relays? Maybe?
Yes, DHCP
Okay.
relays. Exactly. And so in this case, what happens is you've got a DHCP server sitting somewhere on your
Yep.
network, whatever it is. What device is going to see that broadcast? Well, every device on your VLAN is going to see that broadcast, and there's a very important device that's going to see that DHCP client broadcast that says, "Hey, I need an IP address." Your DHCP relay device, which is going to be what typically?
Switch? Maybe? A
Yeah,
router?
could be a
Yeah.
switch, it could be a router. Yeah,
Yeah.
some device that's got DHCP relay functionality, and in that case, what happens is the broadcast goes out. There's no local DHCP server on that VLAN because it's wherever it is, but the router on the network, the
Yep.
default gateway probably on that network, sees that broadcast and relays it and says, "Oh, hey, broadcast for DHCP. I know where the DHCP server is. I'm going to relay the broadcast request to the DHCP server that sits wherever it sits, and kind of sit in the middle of the conversation. Be the proxy that handles that part of the conversation." And in that way, you can have a whole bunch of VLANs that need DHCP services, all resident on a single DHCP server plugged into the network somewhere. And then for each network segment, each VLAN that needs DHCP support, you build a DHCP relay that will forward that broadcast traffic to the DHCP server as a proxy, if you will, and then the DHCP conversation can be completed.
This is one of those things that I know about that I've done, but I've never thought, or not I've never thought, I've never really understood the fundamentals of why am I setting up a DHCP relay.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we covered that because I know what it is, I know what it's doing, but why am I doing it? Well, now I know. It makes a lot of
You're
sense.
doing it because broadcasts don't go past
Yep.
a layer 3 boundary, and but that's how a DHCP conversation actually works.
Yep.
So that's what's going on. And so, in fact, if you're looking at our notes, scroll down to like point 9. Well, let's actually talk through this here. What actually goes on? This so
Yep.
there's a sequence of exchange that happens between a DHCP client and server. So as we could use the acronym DORA. Just as like a mnemonic to remember this: discover, offer, request, and acknowledge. This is a 4-step process for DHCP. Discover, that comes from the client. Basically, a DHCP discover message it just puts the broadcast on the wire saying, "I need an address. Can somebody help me?" Is roughly what that's doing. So it's trying to discover the DHCP server that's out there. A DHCP server will see that discover broadcast message and respond with an offer. And it's going to do a unicast back to not the IP address of the host that requested, because it doesn't have one yet, right? So it's actually
Yep.
going to be a unicast back to as an Ethernet frame, a MAC address, a broadcast or a MAC address unicast back to the client. So discover, help, I need an address. An offer comes from the server, unicast back to the Ethernet MAC as a frame. Here's an address. Um, and then now the client has got an offer in hand. Oh, here's an IP address that I can use. And he will send a request back to the server. You've offered this to me. I am formally requesting this from you, this offer. Good sir, thank you. I will take it, basically. And then the server responds with an acknowledgement. That's the final unicast back. You got it. It's you. Yep. Request acknowledged. It's yours, and you can have it for this long, the lease time, and some other things that you need to know as well. Like we were talking about. Here's the subnet mask. Here's the default gateway. Here's your domain name servers and other things. The DHCP options. We haven't talked about options yet, but those options are going to be included in that. So that's DORA: discover, offer, request, and acknowledge. Is that sequence of events. And then the thing that necessitates the DHCP relay is that very first discover broadcast that goes out on the wire. If there's no DHCP server on that local LAN segment to hear the broadcast, the relay will forward the broadcast off to a known DHCP server or servers, because you can have more than one DHCP server in your network. Hey, we're going to interrupt our discussion for sponsor NordLayer. NordLayer is a network security platform giving you virtual private networking, access control, and threat protection all in one tool.
Let's walk through these. Virtual private networking gives your users secure remote access to your private network resources, no matter where they are. Access control falls under the heading of Zero Trust Network Access. ZTNA is about making sure your users only access what they need when they need it, and that their laptop remains secure while they're doing it. Threat protection is about keeping your users from being exposed to bad internet stuff, malware, ransomware, and phishing attacks.
All right, now if you're listening to this and those seem like basic functions for a security platform, they are, but don't think of NordLayer as like some basic tool. If you're a more advanced engineer that happens to be listening to this show, NordLayer is built on WireGuard, and it's got a lot of features that are going to be interesting to you as an enterprise network administrator. You get things like single sign-on support, VPN usage monitoring, dark web monitoring, deep packet inspection, DNS filtering, and lots of more. There's a whole bunch of bullet points of features that NordLayer offers you.
So go and find out more at nordlayer.com. Pricing starts at $8 per user per month. If you sign up at nordlayer.com with our coupon code NNetworking-10, you get up to 22% off your yearly plans plus 10% on top of that.
That is coupon code NNetworking-10 at nordlayer.com. And now back to our conversation.
Now I'm assuming, let's say, we've got a client connected to the network. We don't have a DHCP. Let's say, or we don't have a DHCP server, or maybe that DHCP relay isn't set up. So it sends out a discover. There's no response. I think we've discussed this in many a time, but I'm assuming that discover has a time to live. So eventually it will just give up because there's no response to it.
Yeah, the client's going to give up, and most operating systems will have some kind of an automatic internal address assigned, so it gets some kind of an IP address. In Windows, I think the abbreviation is a PIPA. It's like a 169.254 address. If you see that, that means Windows gave itself that address because there is no DHCP server, and so it tried, gave up, and the PIPA, APIPA. I'm doing that from memory. I hope that's right. Kicked in, and you end up with that 169.254 dot something address that is should be unique on the local LAN segment. So you get something, so you can do some basic IP communications to anybody else that's in that 169.254 address. And there's other similar kind of automatic self-assignment that different network operating systems use, different schemes. But yeah, something will kick in if no DHCP server responds, for sure. Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's go back through this list. What have we talked about? Oh, so I mentioned DHCP servers can have, you can have more than one DHCP server. There is what I was saying. And so let's why would you want to have more than one DHCP server is my first question. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, I guess if you have, I mean, you shouldn't. I don't want to go into this. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole and I think I'm wrong.
Okay. Well,
You tell me, Ethan.
I'll clue you in a different way. If I have an active standby firewall pair, why
Yeah.
am I do I have that? Why do I have that?
Why do you have them? Well,
What is the why would I bother with the standby firewall? What is the problem, the
because
eventual
they
the
configured
concern I have?
technically as the same device, so they would have the same IP address in theory because it's on standby or configuration.
Well, I mean, but why not just have a single firewall? Why have two of them where one's active and one's standby? What's the
Because if
point?
one breaks, then you've got no backup.
Yeah. So
Oh, I
take that
guess.
logic and apply it to DHCP servers. Why do I want to have more than one DHCP server?
Well, I guess if one breaks, then everything doesn't have an IP address.
Yep, yep. In other words, it is critical infrastructure to
Yeah.
have the DHCP servers, critical network infrastructure. You've got to have it, on the assumption you rely on DHCP to assign IP addresses to your infrastructure. You got to have it. And so customarily, you're going to have more than one DHCP server for redundancy. It's
Hmm.
not the kind of a thing where there's typically a lot of load on the server. I mean, you can run DHCP on, you don't, it's not like you need tons of CPU and memory and disk drive or anything to run. It's not like it's a power thing. You can run DHCP servers on really small devices like teeny tiny little routers. I mean, you can do it. It's not like it's a heavy hitting process. So it's less about spreading load and more about it's critical. You gotta have it. And so we're gonna
Yeah.
have more than one. Now, we talked about DORA a second ago. So forget about DHCP relays. Let's assume I've got two DHCP servers plugged into the same LAN that my DHCP client is. My discover message goes out. There's two DHCP servers that can respond to the broadcast. What do you think happens?
I would assume that they both, well, they'll respond, probably both of them, but one
Yep.
will be received first.
Hmm?
They're not going to arrive at the client at the same time.
Exactly right. You nailed it. That's exactly right. Both servers will see the discover message, that broadcast discover message from the client. Both of them will respond with some kind of an offer, and the client should pick whichever one arrives first. That typically is how that happens. If you were to scope this with Wireshark as a packet
Hmm.
capture and see that, the offer will be received by the client. The client will respond with the request message to whoever got there first, whichever frame it received first as an offer from the DHCP server, and the other one will just get ignored. And the server that got ignored will go, okay, I got ignored, and it'll have a sad and it'll move on with its life. And then the other one will proceed, and the lease will be issued. Um, so you've got some redundancy there, but now there's another concept we need to introduce, and that are DHCP scopes. Do you know what a
Yeah.
DHCP scope is?
So I would assume a DHCP scope is now, well, the scope of IT or pool of IP addresses, the range that you want on your network. So if you want, I don't know, in pretty much creating subnets that are going to be leased out. So you might not want every single, I don't know, 192 address out there, but you defining that based on the IP schema that you've created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, you nailed it exactly right. That is your DHCP scope. It is a pool of IP addresses that has been designed to work with that VLAN. As a network engineer, you've done that IP address management design, and you know that this VLAN is going to be serviced by this network. And from that network, you've created a pool of addresses. That doesn't have to be the whole network, by the way. Let's say we're using 192.168.1 as our network, and it's the subnet mask is /24 255.255.255.0. So that means we can use anything in 192.168.1 0 through 254 are potentially 1 through 254 are valid in that
Yep.
particular scheme. Not 0 wouldn't work in that particular scheme. Okay, so we got 254 addresses. We don't have to use all 254 in our DHCP scope. We can pick, I want to use like addresses 101 to 200, from my DHCP scope, and that's it. There's 100 clients that I could service with that scope. You could do that and have the other ones just not be used by DHCP. You can use them for whatever you want. You're just not handing them out as part of
Hmm.
your DHCP pool to clients that dynamically request and need an IP address. And you can carve up those pools within a network however you want. So let's go back to our two DHCP server scheme. How would you do the pools? Do both servers have the same pool, or do both servers have different pools, different ranges within the network? How do you think it should go?
Well, okay, so if they have the same pool, the exact same pools, and perhaps server A has leased out an address to client A, but now server B has leased out an address to server B because it was faster. It's possible that those two clients might have the same IP address if you don't separate them.
Yeah.
So, best you have different pools.
Yeah, exactly. That would be a customary DHCP design from back in the day. Now, we mentioned companies that are in the DDI space. They're
Hmm.
selling products that are DNS, DHCP, and IPAM, IP address management solutions. Some of those solutions are more self-aware. That is, they know there's a bunch of DHCP servers on the wire, and so maybe you don't have to be quite so fussy with how the pools are assigned because the magic of that company's software will handle how the scopes are split and make sure the problem that you just described doesn't
Yeah.
happen. But if you are manually standing up two DHCP servers that don't know about each other, they're not sharing information, they're not part of some fancy company's DDI solution, and you have to manually, as the engineer, design the pools, then yeah, you do not want overlapping pools because it would be possible, because since the two DHCP
Yeah.
servers don't know anything about each other, that they assign the same IP address to two different clients because it just
What
by the luck of
happens
the draw.
then if
The network
two clients
explodes.
have the
You
same?
have some.
Okay.
So,
Just goes
it
boom.
so so there are mechanisms in the world of networking and in DHCP
Mm.
processes to prevent that sort of scenario. That is, it can happen that during the DHCP DORA process that we described, that part of that process is before we give this out, I'm going to make sure that that's not already on the wire, that no one responds
Mhm.
to it. And so maybe a ping goes out, ICMP, Internet Control Message protocol goes out, a ping, that an echo request in this case. Hey, anybody out here got that address? Anybody responding? And if no one responds, okay, it's safe to give this address out, and then the address is given out because we double checked. We know there's no one on the wire that's got that. So that is a pretty common scenario. Some kind of a safety check is done. And to be fair, I think that's got to happen from the server because the client doesn't have an IP address. So how could it ping to see that the IP address is in use? I'm going through this in my mind. It'd have to be the server
Yeah.
that would sanity check and make sure before I hand this out, none of you other guys are using this, right? And then if the check comes back, good, no one's using it. I got no response to my ICMP echo request, my ping. Then yeah, we're good. We can send it out. But I wouldn't want to have to rely on that. What if there was some host that just didn't respond to the ping for
Yeah.
some reason? Because that's a thing. That's
I
possible.
mean,
There's other
possibly you
sorts
haven't
of
allowed ICMP on that device, so it's not
and
responding. I mean, there's lots of
It's
scenarios,
that's
but
possible, yeah. It's possible you could look for an ARP on the wire. We haven't talked about address resolution
yeah.
protocol, I don't think, but you could look for an ARP on the wire. Did I get a response to my ARP cache where, hey, I'm looking for, I don't know, 192.160.1.100. Did I get a hit? Did somebody respond to that and populate my ARP cache? That would be another way to do that sanity check beyond a ping. That's would be another way to check. But what if you're a DHCP server that you're not on that segment? Your up cache isn't going to get populated because there's a DHCP relay between you and that VLAN. You're not even on that VLAN. So how would that work? So anyway, it's a long
Yeah.
way to say There are, I know in certain DHCP processes, that sanity check of, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do my best to make sure that host isn't on the wire to avoid that situation. However, what if it does happen? What happens if two hosts on the same network segment have the same IP address? What do you think would happen?
I mean, much confusion, but whatever's being sent to that specific IP is going to go to both of those devices. I don't know, it's going to cause much
Well,
confusion.
well, we haven't talked about
Maybe.
ARP yet,
Oh,
particularly
yeah.
address resolution protocol, because it's not that the same packet will go to both hosts, because we're down a level. We're down at layer
Yes.
2. You're going to deliver an Ethernet frame to a host, and the way you're going to decide which host gets it is who responds to your, hey, I know
Yeah.
this IP address. What's the Ethernet MAC address so I can put a frame around it and ship it? Um, Whichever ARP request you get back is the one you're going to send to. And so you could get some hosts are on that LAN segment are responding to one Ethernet MAC, and some hosts on that segment are responding to someone else, depending on how their ARP cache got populated. So the short answer to the question of what happens when two hosts on the same network segment have the same IP address is it can be a little chaotic. You're not getting predictable results. There's weird connectivity problems. It can just be it can be a strange situation
Yeah.
for sure. Uh, you don't want that. You will probably begin to see messages logged by devices that are savvy about these things. Duplicate IP address detected, and it
Yeah.
will, like, one host that's got that IP address would log and say, "Hey, someone else has got my IP address, and this is the MAC address that I see that says they own this IP address. That's actually mine," and you'd be very upset. Sometimes network devices that see this on the wire will respond to this. I support a small network, a little church in my town that's got a Wi-Fi network, and I got some messages logged the other day. Some host has got the same IP address as me, and I haven't checked in to see what it is because they got IP cameras and all kinds of devices that pop on and off that network all the time. Why is there a dupe? I don't know. It bothers me. That shouldn't be happening, but it's like the error hasn't
Yeah.
come up often enough that I've felt like it's been a big challenge, and no one's asked me to dig into a connectivity problem where I can go, aha, but it's that duplicate IP address message I've been getting. So you'll see logs about it. Is my point. But the symptom would be just flaky communications, things not working right, and just be kind of quirky.
Mm.
And yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that scenario. Yeah. All right. What else have we got to talk about here? Okay. So going just to conclude, our two DHCP servers, yeah, we do it for redundancy, and we also do it with what I would call a split scope. You're going to So if you've got 200 addresses in the
Yeah.
range that you want to use, give 100 to one server and the next group of a different 100 to a different server to populate their pools, so that there's no overlapping IP address spaces. How I would do it if I was manually configuring two DHCP servers that don't know about each other.
That was the hole that I was gonna go down when you asked me why would you have two, and I was like, "Wha" I was like, "This is seems too complicated. I'm definitely thinking about this too hard," but we got there in the end. So,
And is also why I say if you're working with an IPAM or a DDI vendor, you may only have to build one scope because they're doing magic on the back end to make sure
mm,
you don't have this kind of a problem like we were describing. But it's good to know what the bad old days were like, Holly. It is, because there's reasons we do things and don't do things when we get into network design.
yeah,
Okay. Um, let's talk about DHCP options. It's the one big piece of this that we haven't really talked about yet. We were talking about in our DHCP offer message, part of the DORA, discover, offer, request, acknowledge. In the offer, there's an IP address. I'm going to take it. That's our request. And then there's an acknowledgement. I believe it's in the acknowledgement packet that comes back from the server that you have a whole bunch of options. Options like what we were talking about earlier, the router, your default gateway, your subnet mask, your DNS servers. Those are all quote unquote DHCP options. And there's a
mhm,
ton of them. There's a whole list of them. if of possible options that you don't most clients don't care, but these options have been codified and are very specific for very specific purposes by the IANA. Now, what is the IANA? I forgot what that stands for. That is, oh, the Internet
Mm,
Assigned Numbers Authority. So this is a group that would say, hey, we as an industry, we all got to agree on, in this case, our DHCP options numbers so that we're all working off of the same documentation. So they have got a whole list here of what DHCP options and what they're for. So the subnet mask is option 1, and the router default gateway, that's option 3. Domain server, option 6. And then there's a ton of other ones. Not every client cares about the vast majority of these, actually, these
yeah.
options, but they get used for a bunch of interesting things. Um, so for example, uh, DHCP version 4, because DHCP version 6 is a little different from DHCP version 4, because of course it is, but DHCP version 4 option 128 is a very quirky specific one that would be used for an IP phone. Like you plug an IP phone to the network and it
Mm,
needs an IP address, but it also has some other stuff it might need to know, like how do I phone home? How do I, or ZTP? How do
yeah.
I, for if I'm a client that's using ZTP, where do I go to download my firmware so I can boot or whatever the next process is in its ZTP configuration protocol? You might tell the client that information via a DHCP option like 128 so that IP phones know about their calling infrastructure, certain details that they need to know. All of that to say, DHCP options can be used for lots and lots of things. Some things that are obvious to us because we're configuring a regular old operating system that needs a host and so on, or it needs an IP address and so on. Some for things that are kind of esoteric and specialized, like things an IP phone needs to know about and so on.
Will the DHCP client in its response say, "Oh, I just want these, like I want 1 through 5," or does it just get all that information?
As far as I know, the client does not request particular options. Ooh, now you're asking for packet level detail that I didn't get to. I don't believe that. I believe
Okay.
that you as the DHCP administrator configure. I mean, I've done a bunch of DHCP server admin work over time, and you populate the options fields with whatever you need, things like maybe you want a default DNS suffix and a bunch of other things that are in there. But if the client can't make use of it, it just doesn't care, I think. But
Yeah.
I do think it gets that information, and if it's an option it doesn't care about, it just ignores it, is what I believe happens. If I'm wrong, I'm sure one of you are going to tell me about that, because I did not look that up before I checked this. uh Another point here to make, Holly, is that we've been talking about DHCP for IP version 4,
Yeah.
and we also talk about IPv6 on this show. And IPv6, the mechanisms like the DORA mechanism is different. It's a different thing, how it does its discovery. It's going to get information about the DHCP server from an RD message, a router, or an RA message, router announcement, I believe. Hey, your DHCP server's here. Go ask it a question. Is what I think goes on, because there is no broadcast in IPv6 as such. Everything is directed. Well, there's multicast, but anyway. So I just say that not because we want to talk about DHCP version 6 today. If you care about DHCP version 6, you can go to packetpushers.net and just do a search for DHCP v6, and you'll get a bunch of shows back that have been recorded on mostly on the IPv6 Buzz podcast channel. And Ed and Tom and Scott and Nick, they'll tell you everything you want to know about DHCP v6 and the nuances. Just for sake of time, not getting into all of it here. And also because I didn't research all the differences, because they're pretty much the same, but there are some key distinctions, and I didn't get it all in my head before we started hitting record today. One of those differences is option numbers. Like option 6 for domain name servers in v4, it's a
Yeah.
different option number in v6. I don't remember what the option number is off the top of my head, other than it's different. It's like, really, guys, you made different option numbers to go from DHCP v4 to v6, and whatever they did. That's how it worked out. Uh, All right. Any more comments or questions, Holly, before we talk about our DHCP security?
I don't think so. I mean, I think everything that you've discussed, I knew about. Whether I knew it
Okay.
correctly is a different story. I've touched it at some point, but it's my whole narrative in this whole show has just been like, I know things, but I don't know like the basics of them. So
Hmm.
that's where I am with DHCP as well. I'm like, yeah, I know what it does. I can configure DHCP relays. Why? Well, now I know. So um, it's good to just revisit all these things and go over the basics, and maybe other people also have kind of forgotten why you do things, because lots of people just do it and don't explain, or become
Yeah.
second nature.
Well, all right then. Then let's hit our final topic,
Hmm.
which is just a few comments about DHCP security. So, what happens if somebody plugs a DHCP server into the network that you didn't authorize? Just imagine what kind of
Yeah.
things you might see. What do you think?
Well, now you're gonna have devices, I guess, new clients possibly connecting and getting IP addresses that maybe aren't within your scope,
Hmm. They
and
could
that's
be
gonna cause some
completely
problems.
out of the network. They could
Yeah.
be, yeah, they completely bogus. And the symptom that that client would experience is probably just fundamental inability to communicate. Probably isn't going to work. Or worse, it could be that it does work because the DHCP server that was inserted into the VLAN is a type of man in the middle attack. And so what the DHCP server, that's this rogue DHCP server, does serves up an address with a bunch of scope options populated so that the client is actually connecting to the rest of the network successfully and everything seems to work, but it's doing it through the attacker's box. And so that attacker can now can see all of the traffic that that client is sending back and forth across the network, and that can be used as part of an attack. It's a man in the middle attack, or it's one form of a man in the middle attack. There's lots of man in the middle attacks that are pretty interesting to talk about, but this would be one. A rogue DHCP server pops up, it's able to serve the client a bunch of information that means the traffic is going to flow through the attacker's infrastructure, and the user doesn't know the difference. It feels like everything's cool,
Yeah.
everything's working. I can get to the internet, I can get to all my apps, which is exactly what the attacker wants, because they're hoping maybe I can grab a password, or maybe I can grab some proprietary information somehow. And this man in the middle attacks can be ugly. So how do you defend against a rogue DHCP server? By the way, most most rogue DHCP servers are not some evil black hat hacker. You do know what they are? Do you know where they actually show up on your network typically?
No.
Somebody brought a box in from home and plugged it in at their desk
It's
because they needed another port. Something stupid like that. I mean, that's that happens. It's like, what are you doing? They bring in like their default thing they bought at in America, Best Buy. It's I don't know how global Best Buy is as a brand, but they bought
it's not.
something, and you're from Best Buy or their local store that they picked it up for $100 and they plug it in, and it has a built-in DHCP
Yeah.
server that just does the thing automatically. And that device, which the person, again, they brought it from home because they needed another port at their desk. I mean, I don't know, everything's Wi-Fi today, but still, that's a thing that can happen. And now the thing's doing DHCP. It's like, what are you doing, man? You're breaking everything on your segment. Like, oh, I
My
didn't
bad.
know. Yeah, my bad. Exactly. So how do you defend against a rogue DHCP server? Well, there's something called DHCP snooping. Cisco's got it, Juniper's got it. It's a very common feature where you tell the switch, hey, switch, I want you to watch all the DHCP conversations going on, and you've configured it,
Hmm.
configured the DHCP snooping on the switch to know what's allowed and what's not allowed, and you can have it be really aggressive, like, hey, if you see a DHCP offer come from an unauthorized port, shut the port down, because that means we're going to shut that rogue DHCP server off, and you can have that all be automated if you want. So I'm just throwing out there that DHCP snooping is a cool defensive feature that's very commonly found in most network switches of the enterprise level for
Yeah.
sure. Cisco, Juniper, Arista, and so on. And If you're configuring switches that are part of your standard company build, that's a thing that, yeah, once you've got your VLANs configured and kind of all your basic stuff working, then you're going to layer in DHCP snooping as a security enhancement, a security feature. You're going to add that to the mix as a standard thing. I would do it. Very well documented, been around for many, many years, very
Yeah.
common as sort of a tool. It's not like this bleeding edge thing at all. So, have you run into
No,
the
and
DHCP snooping?
in UIs, you can check the box or uncheck the
Yeah.
box, you know?
Yep.
But again, one of those things I saw it there, I didn't know 100% what it was for. I kind of just assumed, but I never really configured it fully, so I didn't really touch it to get to know the ins and outs of it. But it's there. I know it's a feature or something
Yeah,
you can do.
if you get time and you feel like nerding out and you get some lab time, yeah, go look into
Yeah.
DHCP snooping and configure it. It's kind of a fun one to detect and disable rogue DHCP servers. Pretty cool feature.
Yeah. Which
What we've been
it's like everything in the network needs to be secure. There's some sort of security around everything. DNS, DHCP, you name
Oh
it,
yeah,
there's a security feature for it.
100%, 100%. You are not wrong. And of course, the annoying part of that is as you enable things like DHCP snooping, if you get it wrong, or you're not like you don't exactly know what you're configuring, you can break stuff. And so you
Yeah.
kind of want to spend some time with it in the lab before you like configure it for production on your network. Excellent feature to have. You should definitely turn it on, but take a few days to get it rolling and then do a controlled rollout. Don't just be
Yeah.
like, okay, and today 1,000 switches are getting DHCP snooping. Boom. No, don't do it. Don't do it like that. Do it in your lab, then do it in a very controlled environment where you can get very comfortable with it, then roll it out a little bit at a time until
Or
you're
they can
done.
do it.
Yeah.
They can do it the other way, and then let us know. I'm excited to hear about your network crashing.
we rolled it out to 1,000 switches, and now no one can get a DHCP address, and we have a sad thanks, Ennis, for networking. Don't do that. We're telling you not to do that. Oh boy. Well, Holly, we've come to the end of another wonderful hour of chatting about network nerd stuff. And if people want to follow you on the internet, how do they do that?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay, you are
Yep.
Holly Matlitsky, and if there's 10 different Holly Matlitskys out there, you're the one that works for Juniper.
I'd be very surprised if there were more than one of me. I'm yet to find her.
And I am Ethan Banks. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, or at the Packet Pushers Community Slack group, which, Holly, you're there too. I know you check in
Yeah.
once in a while. I see you commenting. And you can find the packetpushers.net community Slack group. Again, packetpushers.net/community. Sign up for the Slack group. There's about 3,500 engineers from all over the world in there talking network nerd stuff. We got lots of channels for you. Jump on in, take part in the conversation. And again, follow Holly and I on LinkedIn. We'd appreciate that. We post pretty regularly. And everything else you need from Packet Pushers is at packetpushers.net. Lots of free resources there for you. And last but not least, just remember that networking isn't hard. Other people figured it out, so you can too.